when Emily Carter, a skilled young mechanic with a reputation for bringing forgotten machines back to life, stumbled upon a hidden tunnel beneath an old abandoned airfield, she never imagined what she'd uncover. What started as a routine inspection quickly spiraled into a discovery so incredible it could change her life forever. Inside that dark, dust-covered tunnel, parked like forgotten legends, were military jets worth millions, and the secrets they held could be worth even more. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping journey, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if stories of hidden treasures and unexpected adventures excite you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode will reveal an even bigger mystery. Let's get started. Emily Carter adjusted her wrench, the familiar weight in her hand bringing her a sense of calm. The greasy engine she was working on in the corner of her small garage was typical for a Wednesday. She loved her job being a mechanic. Wasn't just a skill for her, it was a way of life. The clatter of tools, the smell of motor oil, and the hum of a well-oiled machine felt like home. But today, something felt off. It had been a slow week. The phone hadn't rung much, the garage felt emptier than usual, and as she wiped her brow, she realized she hadn't even been outside in hours. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline and grease, but her mind wandered to the past, to her father. Her father, the man who had taught her everything she knew about cars, planes, and anything with an engine. He'd passed away years ago, leaving behind nothing but memories and a garage full of tools. He had always talked about a special place, a hidden airfield out past the old farms, somewhere the government had used for experimental jets and machinery. He'd hinted at it, telling stories about things lost to time, but he never fully opened up. It wasn't until years after his death that Emily began to believe him. There was something about the way he looked when he spoke about that place, something in his eyes that told her it wasn't just a story. Something inside her stirred whenever she thought of it. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. The screen flashed a message from a local mechanic she often worked with. "Hey Em, you up for a new job? Heard about the old airfield up near Miller's farm. Could use some fresh eyes on it. They say there's a hidden tunnel or something down there. Could be worth checking out." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The airfield. The very one her father had talked about. She hadn't thought about it in years. But now she felt a pull. Her curiosity sparked. And before she could second-guess herself, she typed a quick response. "I'm in. Let's see what's down there." She grabbed her jacket and a few basic tools, threw them into her truck, and left the garage behind. The drive felt different this time, like something was waiting for her. The road to Miller's farm was bumpy and worn, the trees stretching over the road like silent sentinels. The air was crisp with the scent of pine, and the quiet was thick, broken only by the sound of her tires crunching over gravel. As she neared the edge of the old airfield, Emily could see the faded runway ahead, the once glorious stretch of tarmac now cracked and overtaken by weeds. The hangars stood in the distance like broken relics of a past long forgotten. The silence was unnerving, but not unfamiliar. It reminded her of the quiet moments spent in her father's garage, his old tools hanging on the wall like trophies. The gate was rusted, but still standing, barely. She parked her truck at the entrance and grabbed her flashlight, the weight of the airfield's emptiness pressing down on her. She knew this place her father had driven her here as a child, showing her the rundown planes and telling her stories about the soldiers who once worked here. But something about it had always felt unfinished, like a chapter that had never been written. Emily made her way toward the nearest hangar, the door hanging slightly open. She stepped inside, the creaking wood echoing in the vast abandoned space. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old fuel lingered in the corners. It was like walking into a memory, one that was half-formed and faded. As she moved deeper into the building, something caught her eye. A narrow, hidden door at the back, almost blending into the wall. Her heart raced as she approached it. She ran her fingers along the rusted handle, hesitant at first, then pushed it open. The door creaked on its hinges, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. Emily took a deep breath and grabbed her flashlight. Her pulse quickened as she descended into the tunnel below. The walls were damp, the air musty with the scent of mildew. But as she moved further, something else filled the space. The distinct hum of something metal, something large. Her heartbeat quickened. The sound grew louder, and then, as her flashlight flicked on, she saw it. There, in the dim light of the tunnel, were military jets, old, but intact, hidden away beneath the earth, like they had been waiting for someone to find them. A chill ran down Emily's spine. These weren't just old planes. They were something more, something valuable, and they were hers to uncover. But as her fingers brushed against the cold metal of one of the jets, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stumbled onto something much bigger than herself. This was no ordinary find. This was a discovery that could change everything. Emily crouched down beside the nearest jet, her flashlight casting long shadows across its surface. She ran her fingers over the sleek metal body, feeling the weight of its history beneath the layers of dust and grime. The aircraft had clearly been left here for decades, yet its design was unmistakable, sharp, angular, built for speed and power. This wasn't just any plane. This was a military jet, one of the kind she'd read about in history books, hidden away like a forgotten treasure. She took a cautious step back, scanning the other jets scattered across the cavernous underground tunnel. There were at least 4 of them, each parked carefully, as if waiting for their moment to rise again. Some were covered in thick tarps that had long since lost their integrity, while others had been left exposed, their once glorious paint jobs chipped and faded by the passage of time. But what caught Emily's attention most was the sheer scale of the discovery. These jets were immense, intimidating even in their state of decay. Her heart raced as she surveyed the tunnel. How had they ended up here? And why were they hidden away like this? The more she thought about it, the more the questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. She felt the weight of their silence, the history locked within their rusted frames. Each jet seemed to have a story to tell, but Emily wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. The sound of her boots echoing in the hollow space made her feel smaller than she'd ever felt before. But she couldn't back down now. This discovery was far too significant, too strange, for her to walk away from. Stepping closer to one of the uncovered jets, Emily noticed a series of faint markings near the tail. They were old and faded, but they looked like a series of codes, possibly serial numbers. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned in for a closer look, brushing away the dust that had settled on the metal. The markings seemed strangely familiar, almost like something she had seen in her father's old wartime photos. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the area near the cockpit. There, beneath a protective layer of grime, was a nameplate, worn down but still legible. The name etched into the metal was Project Tempest. A chill ran down her spine. Her father had mentioned something about a top-secret government project, but he'd never elaborated, and she'd always assumed it was just one of his old stories. But this was real. This was proof of something bigger than just a childhood tale. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was staring at. These jets weren't just old relics of a forgotten military operation. They were a part of something much darker, something with hidden implications far beyond her understanding. The markings, the nameplate, the secrecy, they were all pieces of a puzzle she was now unwillingly part of. With shaking hands, Emily reached for her phone and snapped a few photos of the jets and their markings, her mind already racing through the possibilities. She wasn't sure who could help her unlock the secrets of these jets, but she knew she couldn't do it alone. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden creaking sound behind her, followed by the faintest whisper of movement. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she slowly turned toward the source of the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows of the tunnel, their footsteps slow and deliberate, echoing off the stone walls. Emily's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. The figure stepped forward into the light, revealing an older man in military fatigues, his face weathered but strong. He looked familiar, though Emily couldn't place him. "Who are you?" Emily demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. The man paused, his gaze flickering over the jets before locking onto her with a sharp, calculating look. "Didn't expect anyone to find this place," he said, his voice gravelly. "And certainly didn't expect it to be a mechanic." Emily took a step back, her heart racing. "What is this place? What are these jets?" The man's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "This place has been hidden for a reason, girl. But now that you've found it, I suppose the real question is, what are you going to do with it?" The air between them felt thick with unspoken history, the tension almost palpable. Emily's mind raced as the weight of his words sunk in. What was she going to do with this discovery? She wasn't just dealing with an old military airfield and a few forgotten jets. She was standing at the crossroads of a story far bigger than her father's whispered tales. "Who are you?" Emily repeated, her voice steady but firm, unwilling to let the mystery slip away. The man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Someone who knows what these jets are worth. Someone who knows what they're really capable of." Emily's eyes narrowed as she looked at him. She wasn't sure whether he was friend or foe, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to let her leave this place with answers easily. And suddenly, the quiet tunnel, filled with rusted jets and forgotten memories, felt more like a battlefield than a discovery. The man's eyes never left her, his gaze sharp as if he were evaluating whether she was friend or threat. Emily felt her stomach tighten with a mix of curiosity and caution. This was no ordinary stranger. His presence felt too deliberate, too weighted with knowledge. She took a slow step back, her flashlight casting shadows along the worn walls of the tunnel. Her fingers twitched, itching to grab a wrench, a tool, anything she could use to defend herself if the situation took a dangerous turn. But there was no immediate threat. Not yet. Just the strange, unsettling presence of a man who seemed to know far more about this place than he was letting on. "I could ask you the same thing," Emily replied, her voice cool, but laced with uncertainty. She glanced around at the jets again, the vastness of her discovery settling into her bones. This was a gold mine, and she wasn't about to let anyone else claim it, not without answers. The man took a few steps forward, his boots clicking softly against the floor. He paused beside one of the jets, trailing a hand along the smooth, battered surface. These planes, they were part of a project called Tempest. Top secret, designed for stealth and speed. They were supposed to change the future of warfare, but something went wrong. The project was buried, and so were these jets. Emily swallowed hard. The weight of his words hit her all at once, and a deep sense of urgency rushed through her. These weren't just jets. These were military technology so advanced they had been hidden away, forgotten by time, buried beneath the earth like some sort of military graveyard. Her father had once mentioned his involvement with projects like this, but she'd always assumed it was just old war stories, things he'd embellished to sound more important. Now, standing in front of the very jets he'd spoken of, the gravity of the situation began to hit home. The man turned toward her, his face serious. "These jets are worth millions, young lady. More than just their value on paper. They hold secrets. Secrets that could shift the balance of power. But they're also a liability. Whoever controls these jets controls the future." Emily's pulse quickened. Millions? And secrets that could change everything? The weight of what she had found began to settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She knew enough about military contracts, enough about classified operations, to understand the implications of what was hidden in this underground tunnel. These jets weren't just valuable in terms of metal and parts, they could be game changers for whoever got their hands on them. Her mind spun, trying to process the magnitude of her discovery. She hadn't come here expecting this a hidden military project, jets worth more than she could fathom, and a stranger who seemed to know it all. But the more the man spoke, the more she realized that she hadn't just uncovered some buried treasure. She had stumbled upon something far darker, far more dangerous than she had imagined. "Why are you here?" Emily asked, taking a cautious step toward him. Her voice was steadier now, though her heart still hammered in her chest. The man eyed her carefully, then let out a slow breath. "I've been tracking these jets for years. I know their worth, and I know who will come looking for them once word gets out. People like me. People who can use them for more than just a shiny museum piece. People who have their own agendas. Who exactly are you? Emily demanded. She wasn't sure if she trusted him yet, but she couldn't afford to let the mystery drag on any longer. This place, these jets, were too important. She needed answers. The man gave a small, enigmatic smile. I'm someone who understands the stakes, and I'm someone who can help you get what you need from these planes. His eyes flickered to the photos Emily had taken earlier. But you'll need more than just mechanical know. How if you want to make it out of here alive? A chill ran down Emily's spine. Something about his tone, the cold edge in his voice, sent a warning signal flashing through her mind. She had walked into this tunnel expecting to find broken-down jets, old and forgotten, but now she realized she was tangled in something much larger. She wasn't just dealing with rare aircraft. She was dealing with people who wanted to control them, people who weren't afraid to use force to get what they wanted. Emily stepped back, her eyes narrowing. So what exactly do you want from me? Why are you telling me all this? The man leaned against one of the jets, his arms crossed. I need your help, Emily. You're the one who found this place, and you're the one with the skills to get these jets operational again. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. You're the only one who can do it. The words hung heavy in the air. Emily felt the weight of his gaze, and a sense of unease prickled along her skin. She hadn't come here for anything other than a routine job, but now it seemed like she was in over her head. Why me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. There are other mechanics. There are other people who could fix these jets. The man's eyes darkened. Because you're the one who will understand them. You're the one who'll see what's hidden beneath the surface. I've been tracking these jets for years, but I can't do it alone. You're the key to unlocking what's buried inside them. Emily swallowed hard. She had no idea what this man's game was, but there was no denying it, he was right. She was the only one who had the skills to bring these jets back to life. The only one who could potentially unravel the mystery of the Tempest project and uncover the secrets hidden within. But at what cost? The man's words hung heavy in the air as Emily stood frozen in front of the jet. Her mind was racing, grappling with the implications of everything he'd just said. He wasn't just some stranger. He knew too much about these planes, too much about her father's past, too much about her. And there was no denying that she had just unlocked a door to something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. You're saying these jets, they have secrets hidden inside them? Emily asked, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. She glanced at the jets around her, as if expecting them to reveal some hidden message, some long-lost code that would suddenly make sense of it all. What kind of secrets? The man smiled grimly, his eyes betraying the gravity of the situation. The kind that could change everything. Military technology that was never meant to see the light of day. These jets were part of a covert operation that went awry. What you're looking at isn't just old machinery. It's the key to something much larger, something worth killing for. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Killing for? She hadn't even considered the possibility that people would want to harm her or anyone over these planes. But the way he spoke about them, the reverence mixed with a hint of fear, told her everything she needed to know. These jets were more than just forgotten relics. They were a threat to someone, somewhere. Emily stepped closer to the nearest jet, her fingers grazing the cold, worn metal. The markings on its side were faded but still legible. Tempest, just like the nameplate she had seen earlier. But something else caught her eye. Beneath the wear and grime, there appeared to be a hatch, cleverly hidden between the jet's fuselage and the engine. It looked almost like a secret compartment, one that had been purposefully sealed away. Her heart raced. Could this be it? The secret the man was talking about? She glanced back at him. What's inside this compartment? What's buried under all this rust and dust? The man's face grew more serious, his jaw tightening as if he were calculating his next move. That's the real question, isn't it? I've spent years tracking these jets, but I've never been able to open that compartment. It's protected, encrypted in ways I don't understand. But you're the mechanic. You know how to unlock it. You're the key to figuring out what's hidden inside. Emily's pulse quickened. The gravity of the situation was beginning to sink in. She wasn't just fixing old jets. She was about to uncover a secret so deep that it could potentially change everything about the military, about her father's legacy, and about the dangerous forces willing to do anything to keep it buried. She knelt down beside the jet, inspecting the compartment closely. There was no obvious lock, no code, nothing that screamed access denied. But as her hands traced the edges of the panel, she noticed something strange. A series of small, intricate symbols etched into the metal. They were so faint, so worn, they almost looked like they had been deliberately hidden over time. "What is this? Do you see that?" she asked, her voice low. "These symbols, they're like some kind of code." The man's eyes flickered with recognition, a flash of something akin to urgency crossing his face. "I was afraid you'd find those. They're a type of encryption, military grade. It's a failsafe if anyone tries to tamper with the compartment. The entire system locks down." Emily stared at the symbols, her mind working overtime to make sense of what she was looking at. She had seen codes before, but nothing like this. They weren't random. They had a purpose, a meaning, a key to unlocking something buried beneath the surface. "But I can break it, right?" she asked, more to herself than to him. She had spent years cracking codes, deciphering complicated systems, fixing broken-down engines, and bringing them back to life. This wasn't any different, right? The man's gaze was sharp, almost calculating. "You might, but it won't be easy. If you get it wrong, you could trigger a security protocol, and that could bring more trouble than you're ready for." Emily's hands tightened around the flashlight, but she didn't flinch. She had come this far. There was no backing down now. She ran her fingers over the code again, tracing the symbols, feeling the faint depressions in the metal. Each one was part of a puzzle, and she had a sinking feeling that what was hidden inside this compartment was a game changer. She just didn't know for who or for what. "This is bigger than just fixing old planes," she muttered to herself. "This is a legacy, and it's been buried for a reason." The man stepped back, crossing his arms over his chest. "Exactly. And if we're going to unlock it, we'll need to move carefully, because once this door is opened, there's no going back. There are people who would kill to keep these secrets from seeing the light of day." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. The weight of his words hung in the air, like a storm cloud. Her father's old stories about military secrets and covert operations, once dismissed as just that stories were beginning to come to life in the most terrifying way possible. What had she gotten herself into? She knew one thing for sure now. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when she was so close to uncovering something that could change everything for her. For the jets, and for the dangerous people watching from the shadows. With a deep breath, Emily set to work. The compartment was just a few layers of metal away from being unlocked. Emily felt the steady rhythm of her pulse as she worked, carefully tracing the encryption, the delicate symbols now familiar beneath her fingertips. The air in the tunnel seemed to grow thicker, heavier with the weight of what was about to unfold. Her mind raced with possibilities. What secrets could be hidden in this jet? What had her father known? And what had he left behind for her to find? Each second felt like an eternity, her flashlight beam trembling slightly in her hand. She'd worked on plenty of engines before, repaired countless vehicles. But this was different. This wasn't a simple breakdown. She was opening a door into something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Suddenly, the compartment hissed, a low, mechanical groan reverberating through the tunnel. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She froze, fingers still hovering over the symbols. Had she triggered something? Her mind raced, but there was no time to second-guess herself. The sound of the compartment unlocking echoed louder than it should have, as if the jet itself was warning her. Before she could take a step back, a loud thud came from behind her, a soft, almost inaudible sound, but it was enough to make her spin around. She wasn't alone. The man in the fatigues was gone. She hadn't heard him leave, hadn't seen him move. But the sound that had just made her heart stop was enough to let her know he wasn't where he had been. Instinct kicked in. She wasn't about to be caught unaware. She slipped into a defensive stance, every muscle tense, her eyes darting to every shadow and corner of the tunnel. The dim light from her flashlight flickered, casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. "Who's there?" Emily called, her voice steadier than she felt. Nothing answered, but the soft echo of her own voice bouncing off the concrete. Still, she could feel something. Someone. Watching. It was like the whole airfield, the tunnel itself, was holding its breath. She stepped closer to the jet, her fingers brushing the compartment once again. Just as she was about to pull it open, the air shifted. A sudden sound, a soft click. Then another. A faint scraping noise, barely audible. And then a shadow flickered at the far end of the tunnel. Without thinking, Emily moved instinctively, her feet pressing hard against the floor as she pushed herself toward the shadows, determined to find the source of the noise. She rounded the corner of the tunnel in a flash, her mind racing through every possibility. Was it the man in the fatigues? Had he come back with reinforcements? Or was someone else after the same thing she was? Her flashlight beam cut through the dark, her eyes scanning every inch of the tunnel. And then she saw it movement in the far distance. A figure cloaked in darkness, too far away to be identified. Her heart skipped. She started to take a step forward, then froze. The figure moved again, faster now, closing the distance between them in a way that made Emily's blood run cold. Whoever it was, they were no longer trying to hide. Get back to the jet now. The command rang in her head as she whirled around, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The sound of boots hitting the concrete echoed behind her, the figure moving closer. She was cornered. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Her pulse was roaring in her ears as she scrambled toward the jet. She needed to finish unlocking the compartment. There had to be something in there. Something that could explain what was happening, something that could protect her. Just as she reached the jet's side, she heard a voice from the shadows. "Don't even think about it." Emily spun around, flashlight held out like a weapon. But the figure was already on her. She barely had time to react before a large hand gripped her wrist, yanking her backward with surprising strength. Her breath caught in her throat as she collided with something hard. A body, tall and muscular, looming over her. "You're in way over your head," the man growled, his voice low and full of menace. She could barely make out his features in the dim light, but the weight of his presence was undeniable. He had a calm, controlled energy about him that sent a shiver down her spine. "Let go of me," Emily shouted, using every ounce of her strength to break free. Her hand flew to her belt, instinctively reaching for a wrench. But before she could grab it, the man twisted her wrist, pinning her against the cold metal of the jet. He leaned in close, his breath warm against her cheek. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You think those jets are just old relics? Think again. I don't know who you are, or what you want, but I'm not afraid of you," Emily snapped, her voice firm despite the fear bubbling inside her. The man chuckled darkly, his grip tightening just enough to remind her who was in control. "You should be. People would kill to get their hands on what's in that compartment." His eyes glinted with something dark, something that made her feel like a rat in a trap. "You don't want to know who's really behind this." Suddenly, the figure stepped back, releasing her wrist with one final shove. Emily stumbled, but caught her balance, her mind racing as she assessed her next move. "Stay out of this," the man said, his tone colder now. "You're not just dealing with a few old jets. You're dealing with a whole network. And they won't stop until everything you've uncovered is back in their hands." The last thing Emily saw before he disappeared into the shadows was his cold smile. A smile that promised trouble, and worse, a threat she couldn't ignore. She turned back toward the jet, her heart pounding in her chest, but her fingers still gripped the hatch. She wasn't done. Not yet. There were answers waiting for her inside, and no matter who was watching, no matter what dangers lay ahead, Emily was determined to uncover them. Emily stood frozen for a moment, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The darkness of the tunnel felt heavier now, filled with unspoken threats. The man's warning echoed in her mind. You're not just dealing with a few old jets, you're dealing with a whole network. The words gnawed at her, making her stomach twist in knots. But she couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when she was so close. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, she turned back toward the jet, her flashlight beam flickering as she aimed it at the compartment. She had to finish what she started. What was hidden inside this jet? What secrets were locked away, waiting to be uncovered? Her fingers trembled as she ran them over the hatch. The encrypted symbols still marked the metal, but Emily could feel her focus sharpening. She had a knack for this, understanding systems, breaking codes, finding the hidden mechanism in machines others overlooked. It was what had always set her apart as a mechanic. She wasn't just good with engines. She could feel what they needed, sense what wasn't working, and fix it. The compartment opened with a soft hiss, the air around it thick with the sense of something ancient being disturbed. Inside, instead of the expected bundles of wires or military schematics, she found a stack of old, yellowing documents, papers that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. At the very top, a small black and white photo caught her eye. She picked it up, her fingers brushing the fragile edges. The image was worn, but the people in it were unmistakable. It was a photo of a young man, probably in his late 20s, standing next to a military jet, just like the one in front of her. The man was grinning, clearly proud of the aircraft beside him. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew that face. She had seen it before, though she couldn't place where. As she turned the photo over, a name was written in faded ink. Caleb Carter. Her breath caught in her throat. Caleb Carter? Her father's name? The realization hit her like a freight train. The connection, the threads she had been slowly piecing together, were suddenly clear. This wasn't just some forgotten military project. These jets, this entire operation, were tied to her father. And this Caleb Carter had been involved in it, possibly even leading it. She felt dizzy as the weight of this discovery settled over her. Emily's father had always been mysterious about his past. He had kept his military service shrouded in secrecy, barely ever talking about it, only mentioning cryptic things about missions and projects that he had worked on, but never providing details. She had always thought it was just part of his complicated history, something that didn't really matter anymore. But now, looking at the photo of Caleb Carter next to the jet, it seemed like the past had been waiting to be uncovered. But the truth wasn't just waiting to be uncovered. It had been buried here, deep beneath the airfield, hidden from the world for a reason. Emily stared at the photo, her mind spinning. What had her father been involved in? Why had he never mentioned this Caleb Carter? What was his connection to her? Her eyes darted back to the stack of papers. She began to sift through them, feeling the weight of each document, the weight of her father's secrets unfolding one by one. Each paper she read seemed to piece together a story she hadn't known, a story her father had kept from her. She found detailed engineering diagrams, notes on top-secret military projects, and schematics for the jet she was now standing next to. But there was one document that stood out more than the rest. It was a letter, old and yellowed with age. The handwriting was familiar. It was her father's. The letter read, "To whoever finds this, I'm writing this in case the worst happens. I don't know how far this project will go or if it will ever come to light, but if you're reading this, then that means something has gone terribly wrong. These jets, Tempest, are not just machines of war. They are weapons of unimaginable power, and what's inside them, it could change the world. I've hidden this information, this knowledge, for a reason. It's too dangerous for anyone to use. I can only hope that you have the strength to do what's right." Emily's hands trembled as she read the last lines. Do what's right. She wasn't sure what that meant yet, but she knew one thing. Her father had been part of something bigger than she could have ever imagined. And he had hidden the truth from her for a reason that was now unfolding right in front of her eyes. Her heart raced as she tried to process it all. Her father had been part of the Tempest project. Caleb Carter, the man in the photo, had worked alongside him, and somewhere, hidden inside these jets, was the key to a power so great that it could change everything. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to come together. But as the words from the letter sunk in, Emily realized that uncovering the truth came with a cost. The man who had warned her earlier, the one who had claimed she was in over her head, was right. There were people, dangerous people, who would stop at nothing to keep these jets and their secrets buried. She had just stepped into a world she wasn't prepared for, and now there was no turning back. Emily's mind raced as the weight of her father's letter pressed heavily on her chest. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker, as if the very walls of the tunnel were closing in on her. The jets, the documents, the man who had warned her, everything was spiraling into something far bigger than she had ever expected. Her father's involvement in the Tempest project, Caleb Carter's connection, the power locked within those jets. It was all too much to process in one moment. But one thing was certain: she had to move quickly. There was no time to waste. She had uncovered something that could change everything, and now that she had opened this door, she couldn't leave it shut again. As Emily carefully slid the letter back into the compartment, a sudden, sharp noise broke through the silence. It was a distant clang, followed by the echo of footsteps. Her heart skipped. Someone else was here. She glanced toward the tunnel entrance, her breath catching. The man who had warned her, the one she had crossed paths with earlier, had been right. The discovery she'd made wasn't just a secret, it was a beacon that would draw more than just curious strangers. It would draw people willing to do anything to keep the truth hidden. Emily's hand instinctively moved to her pocket, pulling out her phone. Her fingers shook as she tried to unlock it, desperate to send a message. She had to warn someone, anyone. She needed help. But as her thumb hovered over the screen, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Her pulse quickened. She didn't have much time. The tunnel felt like it was closing in on her, the walls pressing against her as her feet carried her toward the entrance. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't stay where whoever was approaching would find her. If they were here for the jets, or worse, for what was hidden inside them, Emily knew she wouldn't be able to stop them. Not alone. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved quickly toward the tunnel's exit. The light at the end of the passageway was faint, but growing closer with each step. The sound of the footsteps behind her was unmistakable. Now they were getting closer, faster. She had no choice but to run. Her legs burned as she pushed herself harder, faster, the echo of her footsteps blending with the sounds of pursuit. The cold, damp air felt oppressive now, making each breath harder to take. She had to make it out. She had to escape. She wasn't just running from the danger she could see. She was running from the unknown. The jets. The project. The truth her father had kept hidden. Just as she reached the exit, a shadow appeared in the doorway. A figure, tall and imposing, blocked her path. Emily skidded to a halt, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she faced the man who had followed her. The same man who had warned her. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable threat. Her mind raced for an escape, but there was no way around him. She was trapped. "What do you want?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking despite her efforts to remain calm. The man took a step forward, his expression unreadable. "What I want doesn't matter. What's inside those jets is what matters. You've uncovered something dangerous, something that's meant to stay buried." He paused, as if savoring the moment. "And now, people are coming for it." Emily's mind spun. People are coming for it. Her pulse quickened as the realization sank in. She wasn't just dealing with this man. There were others. Others who would stop at nothing to get to the jets, to get to the secrets her father had hidden. "We can help you," the man continued, his tone suddenly more coaxing. "We can protect you. But you need to understand something. This is bigger than you, bigger than your father, and bigger than the jets themselves. There are people who have been waiting for this day for a long time, and they won't stop until everything is in their control." Emily swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. I'm not going to hand over what I've found, she said, her voice firm. These jets, these secrets, they belong to me now, to my father. I'm not going to let them be used for something that could hurt people. The man's lips curled into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think you'll find it's not up to you anymore. You've already made your choice. Now you just need to survive the consequences. Before Emily could react, a loud crash echoed from deeper in the tunnel. The sound of multiple footsteps, hurried and frantic, filled the air. The man's smile faltered, his eyes flickering toward the source of the noise. They're here, he muttered, his calm demeanor slipping for the first time. We need to move. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her like a wave. The danger wasn't just a threat anymore, it was here. People were closing in, and if she didn't act fast, everything she had uncovered would be lost. She didn't have time to think. She had to make a choice. Stay and face whatever was coming, or run and fight another day. She turned on her heel and sprinted into the darkness, the man's voice trailing behind her. You can't run forever. The footsteps that followed her were like a countdown, each one closer than the last. Emily's only thought was to get out, get somewhere safe, because she had no idea who she could trust. But one thing was certain, this race against time was far from over. Emily's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the dark tunnel. The dim light of her flashlight flickered in her hand, barely enough to guide her through the twisting, narrow passages. Behind her, the sound of pursuing footsteps grew louder, faster, relentless. She could feel them gaining on her, but she pushed herself harder, each step echoing in the silence like a drumbeat urging her forward. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn offering no real escape. Her mind raced. The man had warned her, but she hadn't expected things to escalate this quickly. Whoever was after the jets, whoever was after the secrets her father had hidden were closing in, and she had no idea how many of them there were. Think, Emily. Think. She couldn't go back to the jet. It was too risky. There were too many unknowns, and she couldn't let them get their hands on it. But where could she go? The airfield was vast, and the tunnel she was in had no clear exits. Her only option was to get to the surface, but even that felt like an impossible task. The footsteps behind her continued to close in, too fast. Panic clawed at her throat, but she shoved it down. She had to keep moving. Her father had left her a legacy, and she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. She reached an intersection in the tunnel, an old steel ladder leading up to an overhead grate. The way to the surface. It was her only chance. Without hesitation, Emily gripped the ladder with both hands and pulled herself up, her muscles aching from the sprint. Every second felt like an eternity, but she didn't look back. She had to get out. She had to survive. When she reached the top, her fingers gripped the grate. She yanked it open with all her strength, the metal squealing in protest. The moment she was through, she pulled herself into the cold night air. She glanced around quickly, her eyes darting to the empty airfield. It was eerily quiet now, but the feeling of being hunted never left. She couldn't stay out in the open for long. She had to find shelter, a place to regroup. She glanced back at the building she had just emerged from the hangar, where the jets were hidden. The shadows around her seemed to stretch and shift, like the night itself was closing in. Emily's pulse raced as she tried to shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the danger of being pursued. There was a deeper sense of unease, a gnawing feeling in her gut that something wasn't right. She turned to run, but just as she did, a voice called out from the shadows. You really think you can outrun all of this, Emily? The voice sent a chill down her spine. She froze, her heart stopping in her chest. She knew that voice. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto the figure stepping out from the shadows. It was Marcus, the mechanic she had worked with back at the shop, the one who had helped her fix her father's old projects, the one who had seemed trustworthy, like a friend. But now, standing there, his face cold and unreadable, Emily felt the ground beneath her shift. The man who had always been a steady presence in her life, the one who had been there when she needed him, was now standing before her like a stranger. Marcus? She whispered. Her voice shaking, he stepped forward, his eyes hard and distant. You really didn't think I knew, did you? About your father? About the jets? I've been tracking this for years, Emily. I knew your father was involved with Tempest. I knew he hid things, but I didn't know how far it went, how big it was. Her stomach dropped. Marcus? She had trusted him. Had he been playing her all along? Why? Emily managed to choke out. Why didn't you tell me? He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his gaze flickered to the ground, as if he were weighing something in his mind. Finally, he looked up at her, his face a mask of indifference. Because I was just as in the dark as you, until I found out about the jets. And then it all made sense. He took a slow step toward her. Your father wasn't just hiding those jets, Emily. He was hiding them for a reason. He knew people would come for them. He knew this day would come, and he left you here, in the middle of it, to clean up his mess. Emily took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. That's not true. My father wouldn't have done that. Marcus's lips twisted into a bitter smile. He did it to protect you, but you're in way over your head now. You don't know who you're really up against. Emily's mind was spinning. Was Marcus working with those people? Had everything she thought she knew been a lie? She couldn't trust him, but she also couldn't afford to be alone. The stakes were too high, and the dangers were closing in. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, Marcus continued, his voice lowering to a whisper. But it's too late now. You're already involved. Emily's chest tightened as the weight of his words settled over her. She had been betrayed by someone she trusted. Before she could say anything, the sound of cars approaching broke through the tension in the air. They were here. The people who had been tracking her. The ones who wanted the jets. And now, they were closing in on her. She looked back at Marcus, eyes wide with desperation. You have to help me, she pleaded. They're coming for us. Marcus's gaze flickered to the approaching headlights, then back to Emily. His expression softened for the briefest moment, but it quickly hardened again. I can't help you anymore, Emily. This is bigger than both of us, and you're on your own now. With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Emily standing alone in the cold night air, the sound of approaching vehicles growing louder in her ears. Emily's heart thundered in her chest as the headlights of the approaching vehicles cut through the darkness, their beams slicing through the night like a warning. She barely had time to process Marcus's betrayal before the sound of the engines grew louder, too close now to outrun. She couldn't believe it. The one person she had trusted, the one person she had leaned on, had just abandoned her. No, I can't let this happen. I'm not giving up now. She looked around, her mind desperately searching for an escape. The airfield was too open, too exposed. She couldn't stay out in the open for long, not with the vehicles pulling up right behind her. There was nowhere to hide, no shelter to duck into. But then, she saw it. A small maintenance shed near the back of the airfield. It wasn't much, just a rusted structure with a broken-down door, but it was better than nothing. With no time to hesitate, Emily sprinted toward it, her legs burning with every step. She heard the vehicles pulling to a stop just behind her, the sound of tires skidding on gravel echoing in the night. She didn't dare look back. If she did, they'd know exactly where she was. She threw open the door of the shed and rushed inside, slamming it shut behind her with a loud bang. The interior was dark, the smell of oil and metal thick in the air. A few old tools and equipment were scattered across the floor, forgotten like the rest of this place. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath, her pulse hammering in her ears. The shed was small, claustrophobic, but it gave her a sliver of hope. She couldn't hear the footsteps of her pursuers yet, but she knew they were getting closer. Every second counted. Emily's mind raced. How could she fight back? How could she escape this? She had one card left to play: the jets. If she could get back to them, back to the secrets buried in their metal frames, she might be able to turn the tide. She didn't know who was after her, but she knew one thing for certain. They wanted what she had uncovered, and she wasn't going to let them take it. She took a slow, steadying breath. She could do this. She had to. The sound of boots crunching over gravel pierced the silence. Her pulse quickened. They were here. Just as she started to inch her way toward the back of the shed, the door creaked open. Emily froze. She didn't dare move. There, in the dark, she waited, her body tense, her hand ready to grab the nearest tool. The door swung open fully, and a shadow stepped inside. Emily held her breath, waiting, calculating. She wasn't sure how many of them there were, but she couldn't afford to be caught by surprise again. "Come out, Emily," a voice called, its tone smooth, almost coaxing. "We know you're in there. There's nowhere to hide." One. Emily's heart skipped. She recognized that voice. It was the same man who had confronted her earlier, the one who had warned her. He was back, and this time there was no escape. She glanced around frantically. She had to act quickly. In the corner of the shed, she spotted a rusted crowbar, discarded in a pile of old metal. It was her only weapon, but it would have to do. With quick, determined movements, she grabbed it, her hands closing around the cold metal. She didn't have a plan. She just had to survive. Another voice called from outside the shed. "We're not playing games here. You can't keep running." The man's footsteps grew louder, closer. Emily's breath caught in her throat as the figure came into view. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in tactical gear. A gun hung loosely at his side. But it wasn't the weapon that scared her, it was the cold look in his eyes, the way he seemed to know exactly how to track her down. "Give it up, Emily," he said again, his voice softer this time. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to run." Emily raised the crowbar, her muscles tensed and ready. "I'm not running," she said through clenched teeth. "I'm fighting," the man chuckled darkly. "You think you can fight us? You're out of your league. You're just a mechanic. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Maybe," Emily replied, her voice cold with determination. "But I'm not backing down." Before the man could take another step, she lunged. The crowbar swung with all her strength, and with a sharp clang it struck the man's arm. He grunted, stepping back in surprise, but he quickly regained his composure, drawing his weapon. Emily's heart raced. The gun. Her instincts kicked in as she dove for cover, sliding behind an old workbench in the corner. The man cursed, trying to aim his gun in her direction, but his movements were slower now, more cautious. He was trying to predict her next move. "Think, Emily. Think." She scanned the room for anything she could use to her advantage. Her eyes landed on a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. It wasn't much, but if she could use it to blind him for just a few seconds, she might be able to get away. Without thinking, she grabbed it, pulled the pin, and aimed the nozzle at the man. She squeezed the handle, and a blast of foam erupted from the extinguisher, hitting him square in the face. He staggered back, his gun slipping from his hand as he wiped his eyes. Emily didn't hesitate. She rushed forward, her crowbar raised high. The man tried to scramble for his weapon, but it was too late. Emily brought the crowbar down on his arm, knocking him to the ground. His body crumpled with a groan, but he didn't move after that. Panting, Emily stood over him for a moment, her heart racing. She couldn't afford to waste time. She had to finish this, and finish it quickly. She dashed back toward the tunnel, her mind focused solely on the jets. She had no idea what was coming next, but she couldn't afford to stop now. The stakes were too high, and if she didn't act fast, everything she had uncovered would be lost forever. Emily's feet pounded against the gravel as she sprinted toward the hangar, her breath ragged, her muscles aching. The sound of the chase was still fresh in her mind, the sharp echo of footsteps and the blast of the fire extinguisher. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not when she was so close to uncovering the rest of her father's legacy. The jets, hidden away for decades, still held secrets she had yet to unlock. And no one, not Marcus, not the man in tactical gear, not anyone would take that away from her. She had already lost too much. She couldn't afford to lose this. As she reached the hangar, she threw open the door, the familiar scent of oil and metal welcoming her back like an old friend. The jets were just as she had left them, their hulking forms looming in the dim light, waiting. Emily approached the closest one, her fingers already tracing the edges of the compartment she had unlocked earlier. She didn't know what she was looking for exactly. All she knew was that she had to find it before they did. She had no time to lose. Her flashlight swept across the interior of the jet, her gaze landing on a small metal box wedged beneath one of the seats. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her pause. The box was sealed shut, and there were more of those cryptic symbols on its surface, the same symbols that had been on the compartment. This was it. This was what she had been searching for. With trembling hands, Emily pried the box open, her heart in her throat. Inside, there was a series of documents, more papers covered in military-grade encryption, and what looked like a flash drive, worn with age. She picked it up carefully, the weight of it, like a promise. It was the key to everything, the key to her father's secrets. She didn't know what was on it yet, but she knew she had to protect it. She had to keep it safe. Because if the wrong hands got it, it would be the end of everything. Just as she slid the flash drive into her pocket, the sound of approaching vehicles reached her ears. They were back. The footsteps she had heard earlier in the shed. They were closing in again, faster this time. Emily's chest tightened as the realization hit her. There was no more time. She quickly zipped up her jacket, clutching the flash drive close to her chest as she moved toward the back of the hangar. She couldn't stay here. She had to disappear, at least for now. There had to be somewhere she could hide, somewhere she could regroup and figure out her next move. The stakes were too high. Just as she reached the back door of the hangar, a voice rang out behind her. "Not so fast, Emily." The same man from earlier stepped into the doorway, a gun now holstered at his side. His expression was no longer cold. It was weary, almost regretful. But Emily didn't stop. She couldn't. "You can't stop me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I'm not giving up what I've found." The man took a step forward, his eyes scanning the hangar. "You don't understand. There's no escaping this. You've already made your choice. These jets, this project, it's too big. You're tangled in something far deeper than you think." Emily didn't flinch. "I don't care how big it is. My father left me this, and I'm going to finish what he started. I'm going to make sure no one uses these jets for the wrong reasons." A long silence stretched between them. Then the man sighed. "I hoped you'd understand eventually." He looked at her with something akin to pity. "But it's too late for that." "Oh." Emily didn't wait for him to make his next move. She dashed toward the back door, shoving it open with all her strength. The cold night air hit her like a wave, and she barely glanced back as she sprinted into the darkness. She could hear the man shouting behind her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. She was on her own now, and the world was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But she had the drive, the will, the knowledge, and most importantly, she had the secrets her father had kept hidden. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There were people who would stop at nothing to get their hands on what she had found, but Emily knew one thing for certain. She wasn't backing down. She would fight for this, for the jets, for her father's legacy, and for the truth. As she disappeared into the night, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The sky was painted with hues of orange and purple, a new day unfolding. It wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning.